is Farming with Science. Hello again. Welcome back to Farming with Science. Today, our main topic is what is happening to my plants. And for this topic, we have Miss Marlia Bosques, no relationship to me, well, maybe, because we're both from the same side of the island. But she is going to talk to us about how to identify issues that are happening with our crops, our garden plants, and even our indoor house plants. Marlia, how are you this morning?
I'm very good, and thank you so much for having me here. Today I'll be talking about plant diseases and some basic concepts and terms that we should know if we have a garden, if we have a farm, or even indoor plants. All of this information is super important to be able to keep your plants healthy and good looking.
All right, Marlia, most of our small farmers and backyard producers sometimes have issues identifying the disease that they have in the farm. So why is it important to identify the right disease in our farm or backyard?
Thank you for that question. So it's super important because in order to have a proper management for your diseases, you need to know what disease you have. So if you have a bacterial disease and you actually apply a fungicide, you're wasting time, resources, and just in general energy that you should be using for other stuff in your farm or in your garden. So it's highly important too because it can lead to yield loss. It could also lead to economic loss and a bunch of other stuff that we don't want in our farm. So I also wanted to start a little bit with talking about terms that we should know about plant diseases in general. So first, sometimes we use interchangeably the word pest to mean plant diseases. But when we're talking about pest, we're actually describing damages that are related to insects, and those are studied by entomologists. Whereas plant pathologists, they study plant diseases. And a disease is usually classified in two broad terms. We have biotic diseases and we also have abiotic diseases. When we talk about biotic diseases, we're talking about living organisms such as pathogens, bacteria, fungi, viruses, nematodes. They can all cause biotic diseases in your plants. On the other hand, when we talk about abiotic diseases, we are talking about physical or chemical factors such as drainage, soil pH, we have temperature, nutrient deficiencies. All of that could also create certain disorders and symptoms in your plants, and they can sometimes be confused with biotic diseases. So it's very important to know the key differences between these specific terms.
Okay, so just for understand, if it's not an insect, it's a disease.
Correct. Yeah. So when we're talking about pests, we talk about insects, and diseases are usually either biotic or abiotic. And when we mean biotic, it's usually this small, very, very little organisms known as pathogens. So diseases are caused by pathogens, such as humans also get diseases too, and we get infected by bacteria and viruses. The same could happen to plants.
So, in order for that plant to get sick, I know that certain conditions need to happen. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So when we think about plants and we think about plant diseases, for it to actually happen, we as plant pathologists talk about the disease triangle. So for a disease to develop and to thrive under a certain environment, we need three factors at the same time. So these three elements are a susceptible host, we need a virulent pathogen and a suitable environment. And when we conceptualize the disease triangle and we start to understand the different components that are needed for a pathogen and a disease to thrive, we start to think about how we can manage a disease. And by this, I mean that we can sometimes control the environment. So, for example, when we talk about the environment, you can control the environment to make it less conducive for the proliferation of certain types of diseases. So, for example, if you have a greenhouse and you have a certain fungus that is present, we can control the temperature or humidity to make it less favorable for that specific pathogen. And when we think about the host, we can actually select specific varieties that have resistance to specific diseases. So, for example, in tomato, there are different varieties that have resistance to root knot nematode, which is a really, really important nematode in Florida and in Puerto Rico. And by using this variety, you already have resistance to root knot, and you don't have to be paying attention to that specific disease. And we know that by choosing this, you're going to have a better and healthy farm.
And talking about that, that's why we have experiment station and university personnel evaluating those varieties. And they're recommending, they're evaluating and then recommending specific varieties for your location. And we think about what our clients do, and sometimes they order seeds from another state, another country, and those seeds will probably not do as well just because they don't have the genetic potential, the genetic capabilities to withstand some of the environmental factors that we have to manage in Florida or Puerto Rico, where it's warmer and more humid.
Yeah, so it's always important to check your online resources, check your extension websites, and find what specific varieties are the best for the type of environment you're growing them. And also see if there's any pathogens that are prevalent in your area. You can also check online resources for that. So if you know that in certain parts of Florida, there's a specific pathogen that is very common in a certain area, you at least should try to find varieties that have resistance to that. And that way you're already managing and preventing certain types of diseases that are really important.
Marlia, what are the abiotic factors that we can find in our farms or backyard?
So abiotic plant diseases can be defined in two broad categories. We have chemical and physical factors. When we talk about chemical factors, it can mean nutrient excess or deficiency, air pollution or damaging gases that can be found in greenhouses, chemical injuries that could either be fungicides, insecticides, herbicides. So it's always important to follow the label and read thoroughly so you're doing the correct application of your pesticide. We also have plant growth regulators that can cause different disorders and de-icing salts. For physical factors, we have soil pH, soil structure, moisture extremes, water stress, temperature extremes, storm damage, equipment injury, and even animal damage. So it's very important to know those factors and know that they can cause symptoms in your plants, and they can sometimes even be confused with biotic diseases. And just as a recap, biotic diseases means pathogens. So we have bacteria, virus, nematodes, and fungi that can cause biotic diseases.
So if our clients or our viewers are more interested in finding more information about this topic, about how to learn to identify diseases and disorders, just remember that IFAS Extension offices are around the corner. Just pay us a visit. We can identify or help you identify some of these diseases and disorders that are affecting your specific situation or your specific crop.
Remember that if you need more information, you can ask to any of the extension services in all of the 50 states, including Hawaii and Puerto Rico. Thank you.
This is Farming with Science.